Maid notices. Mute boy's strange signs. What she discovers about his parents is horrifying. The sun was shining over the Richards mansion, a big house with clean white walls, perfect green grass, and windows that sparkled like they had nothing to hide. On the outside, it looked like a dream. But inside, something didn't feel right. At the far end of the yard, a little boy sat alone under a tree. His small hands moved gently through the dirt, drawing quiet shapes that only he understood. His name was Ethan. He was 8 years old, and he couldn't speak. Not a word, but his eyes said everything. Delilah, the maid who had started working there a few months ago, was setting up trays of juice and snacks for the guests at the garden party. From the corner of her eye, she saw Ethan again. Always sitting away from the other kids, always quiet, always watching. She'd tried a few signs with him before. He seemed to understand but never said much. Today was different. When she walked by to offer him a juice box, Ethan looked up at her. His little hands moved quickly. He signed a word she hadn't seen before. She paused. She leaned down, gently, and repeated it to make sure she got it right. Hide? Ethan gave a quick nod, then looked around nervously. That was the moment Delilah knew this wasn't just a shy boy. Something was wrong. The party continued with clinking glasses, fancy laughter, and speeches about charity. Mr. Richards, the boy's father, stood near the stage in his perfect suit, smiling like everything in the world was just right. His wife, Caroline, stood beside him in a pale blue dress, holding his arm and smiling politely at everyone who looked. Delilah moved through the crowd, clearing napkins and topping off drinks. But her mind was back with Ethan under that tree. What had he meant by hide? Was he scared? Of who? And why? When she passed the boy again, he wasn't drawing anymore. He was picking nervously at the buttons on his shirt, eyes on the ground. She crouched near him and offered a glass of apple juice, signing the question along with her voice. He reached for it, but his hands were shaking. The glass slipped from his fingers and spilled on the grass. That's when Caroline's sharp voice cut through the air like a knife. "Ethan!" she hissed, rushing over. "How many times have we told you to be more careful?" Before Delilah could speak, Mr. Richards appeared behind his wife, still, wearing that same polite smile. "Go inside and change," he said, quiet but firm. Ethan looked up at them, then at Delilah. His lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes looked like they were begging her for something she didn't yet understand. "I'm sorry," Delilah said quickly. "It was my fault. I didn't make sure he had a good grip on the glass." She signed as she spoke, hoping to calm the boy down. Jacob Richards let out a forced laugh. "Nonsense, Delilah, but thank you for trying to protect him." He patted Ethan's back lightly. The boy flinched. Not much, but Delilah saw it. Later, after the guests had gone and the house was quiet again, Delilah finished washing the last dishes. She thought of her own daughter, Mia, probably doing homework with their neighbor while she worked late again. She needed this job. It paid, better than anything else she'd found. But every day she spent in this house, the feeling in her gut got heavier. Like something was sitting under the surface, waiting to be found. That night, while turning down Ethan's bed, she noticed how neat and colorless his room was. Not a single toy out of place. It didn't feel like a kid's room, more like a hotel. As she pulled the blanket up to his chest, Ethan's hands moved again. "Hide," he signed. Again. She frowned. "Do you mean a game?" But he shook. His head. Footsteps in the hallway made him pull the covers over his face. Mr. Richards stood in the doorway. "Everything all right in here?" "Yes, sir. Just finished story time." "Good." He looked at Ethan. "Remember what we talked about. Your behavior matters." Delilah watched the boy nod quickly, his tiny hands gripping the blanket, until his knuckles turned white. As she walked past the basement door later that night, she noticed the heavy lock again. It looked like something you'd find in a bank, not a house. Just storage, they'd said. Nothing of interest. But Delilah was starting to think that maybe the most important things in this house were the ones nobody wanted her to see. And maybe, just maybe, Ethan was trying to show her. The next morning, Delilah arrived early, like always. The Richards' house was quiet, too quiet for such a large place. She stepped in through the side door and started her daily routine in the kitchen, opening curtains, setting out dishes, brewing coffee, but her mind kept drifting back to Ethan's face the night before. That one word he had signed again and again, hide. Delilah had been learning sign language ever since she took the job. At first, it was just to make things easier, something to help Ethan feel comfortable. But now it felt like the only way to understand what he was trying to say when his voice couldn't come out. She heard small footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Ethan standing in the doorway, still in his pajamas. He was clutching his hands together nervously. "Good morning," she signed, smiling gently. He looked at her for a moment, then his fingers moved again. This time, he signed 2 short words. "Help me." Delilah's heart skipped a beat. She moved closer, kneeling so they were eye level. "What kind of help, sweetie?" She signed carefully. Before he could respond, heavy footsteps echoed down the stairs. Ethan's eyes went wide. He turned and hurried off just as Mr. Richards entered the kitchen, dressed perfectly in another sharp suit. "Is the coffee ready, Delilah?" he asked with a smooth smile. "Yes, sir." "Just brewed," she replied, trying to hide the tension in her voice. As she poured his coffee, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Ethan's wrists, when he reached for a toy the day before, had faint purple marks, like someone had held him too tightly. She thought about them all night, and now they haunted her thoughts. She had assumed maybe he'd fallen. But now, with the words, "Help me," signed so clearly, it didn't feel like a fall. That afternoon, while dusting in the study, her cleaning rag caught on something in the back of Jacob's desk drawer. She paused, gently moving aside a stack of papers. Taped to the bottom of the drawer was a small key. She held it in her hand, just for a second. It was cold and heavier than it looked. Delilah's eyes drifted to the hallway, where that basement door always stood locked. Every time she passed it, something deep in her gut twisted. A key like this didn't belong in a drawer unless someone wanted to make sure nobody ever found it. She tucked the key back exactly where she found it. Not yet. She needed more time, more proof. If she acted too fast, she might put Ethan in even more danger. That evening, Delilah helped Ethan with his nighttime routine. She brushed his hair back gently after his bath, helped him into his pajamas, and sat beside him as he tucked his teddy bear under the blanket. "Do you want a bedtime story?" she asked, signing as she spoke. Ethan didn't answer at first. Then he reached under his pillow and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, crude but clear. A man with a tall frame, a small boy with tears falling from his eyes, and a door. Chains were drawn in black crayon, wrapped around something inside that door. At the bottom was a small, shaky signature, Ethan. Delilah's breath caught in her throat. She reached out, her hand trembling, and signed, "Did you draw this?" He nodded slowly. "What does it mean?" Ethan's hands moved again. "Bad people. Downstairs." Delilah didn't know what to say. Her throat felt tight. She didn't want to scare him, but she needed to understand. She needed to know how deep this darkness went. "You're very brave," she whispered, her hands gently signing the words too. "I believe you." Just then, Caroline appeared at the door, clearly irritated. "Is he still not asleep?" "Honestly, Delilah, this boy doesn't follow any routine," she said with a sigh. "I'm just finishing up, ma'am. Delilah replied quickly, folding the drawing and slipping it under Ethan's mattress when Caroline wasn't looking. Later, as the house went quiet again, Delilah couldn't sleep. Even in her own apartment, her chest felt heavy. She stared at the ceiling, thinking of Mia, thinking of Ethan. Her instincts screamed louder than ever. She knew what she had to do now. This wasn't just about a quiet boy anymore. It was about the secret he'd been forced to carry in silence. And tomorrow night, when the house was empty again, she would find out exactly what was behind that locked basement door, because she couldn't let Ethan keep hiding from something so terrible without someone finally listening. And she was ready to be that someone. Delilah stood in front of the basement door with the small key burning in her pocket. The house was dark, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. Upstairs, Ethan was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Earlier, when she tucked him in, he signed just one word, careful. That one word had stayed with her all night. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:47 p.m. Caroline and Jacob were out at another event, another charity function with cameras and speeches, and the same smiling faces who would never suspect what was happening beneath their feet. Delilah's hand shook slightly as she reached for the key. Her heart was pounding so loud she was sure it would wake the whole house, but she had waited long enough. She had to know. The key slid into the lock easily, almost too easily. With a soft click, the door creaked open. A chill drifted up from the stairwell, colder than it should have been. She switched on her phone flashlight and began to descend the steps, each one groaning under her weight like it didn't want her there. The basement wasn't dusty or full of boxes like she expected. No, it was clean. Too clean. Polished tile floors, freshly painted walls. There were shelves along one side and a long wooden table in the center, but what stopped her in her tracks was the far wall. It was different, like it wasn't meant to be part of the original house. The wall was slightly off color, too smooth. Delilah stepped closer and ran her hand along the surface. And then she found it, a seam. She pressed against it, and the panel popped open with a soft hiss of air. Behind it was a second door. Heavier. No handle. Only a keypad and a manual bolt that had already been unlocked. Someone had been down here recently. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. What she saw next would never leave her. The room was small but packed. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, each labeled with different dates. On one side, there were corkboards full of pinned documents, photos of children, scanned IDs, scribbled notes in different handwriting. Some of the kids looked no older than Ethan, but the names on the passports didn't match the children's faces. Delilah's hand flew to her mouth. Fake identities. She snapped photos as fast as she could, every document, every face, every strange list. She opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were folders. Some had names crossed out, others highlighted. Some had numbers written beside them. Big numbers. And next to one folder was a photo of Ethan, younger, smiling. But even then, there was sadness in his eyes. She backed away, nearly tripping over a loose board in the floor. Her light caught the edge of something metal, another door, smaller, lower. She knelt, heart pounding, and pulled it open. A second room, this one. This one was worse. The walls were gray, but there were deep scratch marks near the floor. A child's bed sat in the corner, buckled with leather restraints. Toys were scattered across the floor, some broken, some untouched. There was a tiny nightlight shaped like a star. This wasn't just a hidden room. This was a cell. Delilah's knees buckled. She dropped to the floor, her phone shaking in her hand as she took more pictures. The air was heavy, like fear had soaked into the walls. In the far corner, she saw something crumpled, a drawing. She picked it up gently. Another picture by Ethan, a man standing tall, a crying child in a room, and what looked like chains. She could barely breathe. He hadn't just seen something down here, he'd been in this room. Delilah's tears blurred her vision. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stop herself from sobbing out loud. What kind of monsters could do this, especially to their own child? Suddenly, a noise made her freeze. A door slam, somewhere above. Voices. Muffled at first, then clearer. Jacob and Caroline were back. Delilah's pulse exploded in her ears. She shoved the drawing into her pocket and backed out of the cell, closing the doors behind her as quickly and quietly as possible. She relocked the hidden panel, shut the basement door, and flew up the stairs just in time to hear Jacob's voice down the hall. "Delilah?" he called out. She tried to sound calm. "Just cleaning the kitchen, sir." Her voice cracked. A little, but he didn't seem to notice. He walked past the hallway, loosening his tie. "Busy night," he muttered. Delilah kept her head down, hands trembling as she wiped down the counter. She couldn't stop seeing that room. Those photos. That bed. She had the proof now. The truth was no longer hidden. The only question was, what would she do next? Because she knew, if she made the wrong move, it wouldn't just be her job she'd lose. It might be Ethan's last chance for someone to save him. And this time, she wasn't going to wait. Delilah didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the images from the basement replaying in her head on a loop. The tiny room, the fake passports, the children's faces, the restraints on the bed, Ethan's drawing. She felt sick. Her fingers wouldn't stop twitching. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's hands signing, "Help me." Now she finally understood what he meant. He hadn't just been scared. He was trapped. She'd seen enough to know this was bigger than just one scared boy and one messed up family. Something dark and dangerous was going on under that beautiful house. And Jacob Richards, the perfect father, the perfect neighbor, was the one behind it. By morning, Delilah had made a decision. She wouldn't run. She couldn't. If she did, more children could end up in that basement. She had Ethan's trust, she had the evidence, and she had her phone, filled with the photos that proved everything. She went to work early. The sky was still gray, and the house was quiet. Her stomach twisted as she turned the key and stepped inside. It felt different now. Not just cold, not just creepy. It felt evil. Ethan was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a juice box in his hand, but not drinking it. His legs swung slightly under the chair, and his eyes darted toward the hallway every few seconds. Delilah knelt beside him and gently signed, "Good morning." He looked at her, his fingers shaky but quick. They're angry. They know. Delilah's heart dropped. "What do you mean?" he yelled. He said, "My drawings are gone." Her hand instinctively touched her pocket. She still had the one she'd taken. It was probably the only thing she hadn't put back in the basement. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. His hands moved slowly now. "He thinks I told someone. I didn't. I only told you." Delilah leaned closer. "You did the right thing. I'm going to keep you safe." Before she could say more, Jacob's voice boomed from upstairs. "Delilah! Coffee!" She stood, signed quickly to Ethan, "Stay strong," then turned and walked out of the kitchen, hiding the fear on her face. In the study, Jacob was already poring over some papers. His expression didn't change when she entered, but his voice was colder. "You're getting close to my son, aren't you?" he said casually, not looking up. Delilah kept her voice steady. "Just trying to support him the best I can, sir." "Support," he repeated slowly, tapping the desk. "That's an interesting word choice. You know, I hired you to clean. Keep the dishes sparkling. Floors neat. Not to parent my child." She didn't reply. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Jacob finally looked up, and this time there was no friendliness in his face. "Stay in your lane, Delilah, or things might get complicated." She left the room without a word. Her legs felt like lead. She went into the laundry room and closed the door just so she could take one deep breath without crying. He knew, or at least he suspected. She had to be careful now. Very careful. Later that afternoon, after checking on Ethan again and slipping him a cookie when no one was looking, she found herself in the study again. This time she was dusting and trying to act like nothing had changed, but something had. Taped beneath the desk drawer where the key had once been was now nothing. The key was gone. Her throat tightened. Had Jacob realized it was missing? And then something else caught her eye. A folder lying slightly askew under a stack of paperwork. She lifted the edge and found a list. A name on it jumped out, at her. A woman she had seen at one of the Richards' recent dinner parties. Next to the name was a series of numbers and the word confirmed. Another name was crossed out completely. She snapped a photo and tucked the folder back exactly. How she found it. That night she didn't go straight home. Instead, she met her closest friend Sandra at a cafe outside the neighborhood, a place Jacob would never visit. Over coffee, Delilah told her everything: the basement, the photos, the drawing, the cell. Sandra's face went pale. "Delilah," she whispered, "this is huge. This is criminal. You need to go to the police, right now." "I will," Delilah said quietly. "But I need to be smart. If I go too soon and they warn him, he'll clean up everything. Burn the files. Move the kids. Hide the evidence." Sandra leaned across the table. "Do you have proof?" Delilah nodded. "Photos. Everything. Hidden on my cloud. If something happens to me, it's already out there." Sandra grabbed her hand. "You're brave, but promise me. Be careful. Think of Mia." That name, her daughter's name, hit Delilah like a stone. Her little girl. She couldn't lose this job. She couldn't afford to run, but she couldn't stay quiet either. Back home, after Mia fell asleep, Delilah sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. Ethan had trusted her. And now, the next step wasn't just about uncovering secrets. It was about protecting him, before it was too late. Delilah didn't sleep again. Each night since she found the basement had felt heavier than the last. The house, the whispers, the signs Ethan kept making. It was like being in a dream you couldn't wake up from. Except it wasn't a dream. It was real. And she was in the middle of it. The next morning, something felt off from the moment she stepped into the Richards' house. The air felt heavier, quieter than usual. She didn't hear Ethan's light footsteps or the sound of the TV playing cartoons, just silence. She called out softly, "Good morning?" No answer. She walked into the kitchen, and there he was, Jacob Richards, already dressed, already watching her. He stood by the window, coffee mug in hand. His smile wasn't friendly. "You're early today," he said. "I always start at 7, Delilah replied, trying to sound normal. He nodded slowly, almost like he was measuring her response. "You've been a big help with Ethan lately." She felt her stomach tighten. "I try to do my part," she said. "That's just it," he replied. "Sometimes people forget their place. They start doing more than they should. Acting like this house belongs to them. Like he belongs to them." Delilah stood still. She didn't flinch, but her hands inside her sweater pockets balled into fists. "I'm just doing what I was hired for," she said calmly. Jacob stepped closer, placing his coffee mug on the counter a little. Too hard. "Let me be clear, Delilah. You work for us, nothing more. Stay focused on your job and we won't have a problem." He picked up his briefcase and walked out of the kitchen without another word. Delilah stood frozen for a long moment, heart pounding. He was warning her. He knew. Later that afternoon, Ethan returned from school, but something about him looked different. He walked slower, shoulders hunched. He held his backpack tightly to his chest. Delilah knelt to greet him, gently brushing his hair back. "Hey," she whispered. "How was school?" His hands moved slowly, hesitant. Bad people. Coming soon. She frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan looked around nervously, then unzipped his backpack and handed her a folded note. It was a drawing. Another one. This time it was different. It showed a group of adults in suits, standing in a line. A van parked outside a house. A small figure, Ethan, standing behind a window with tears down his face. Delilah's chest tightened. He knew something. Something big was about to happen. That evening, while tidying the laundry room, she heard the basement door again. Not just opening, slamming. Footsteps going down. Voices. Movement. She held her breath and pressed her ear against the air vent near the floor, which had a direct line to the basement. Faint sounds echoed through. Someone was moving furniture, something metallic clinking, followed by a low voice saying, "They're coming this weekend. Get it cleaned up." She stepped back, heart racing. Whatever they were planning, it was happening soon. That night, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. She called Sandra. "I need help," she whispered. "I have evidence. I have everything, but I think they're planning something soon. Maybe moving the children. Maybe worse." Sandra was silent for a beat, then said, "Delilah, my brother's a detective. I'm calling him. No more waiting." Delilah hesitated. "If they find out, I'll lose everything. They could come after Mia or Ethan." "No," Sandra said firmly. "If we don't act now, they'll just keep going. You know that." Delilah took a shaky breath. "Okay, call him." She hung up and sat in silence, looking around her tiny apartment. Mia was asleep in the next room. Safe. For now. But Ethan? He was still trapped inside that house. The next day, everything felt too calm. Jacob was gone most of the day. Caroline pretended not to look at her. Ethan barely made eye contact. And then, right after lunch, Caroline approached Delilah near the hallway. She didn't speak at first. Just looked at her, then whispered, "You should be careful. You don't understand what you're in the middle of." Delilah looked back, calm but steady. "Then explain it to me." Caroline didn't reply. She just walked away. That night, Delilah got a call from Sandra. "My brother's team is putting something together. He says if you have a recording, anything solid, they'll move faster." Delilah paused, then said, "Give me one more day. I think I can get him to talk. He's slipping." And she meant it. Jacob was getting sloppy. He thought he scared her into silence. But Delilah had something he didn't. She had truth. And she had nothing left to lose. Tomorrow, she would set the trap. And pray it was enough to finally bring him down. "You said..." Delilah barely touched. Her breakfast the next morning. She sat at the edge of her bed staring at her phone. The photos. The drawing. The audio memo she had quietly recorded last night of Jacob speaking on the phone, telling someone the buyers will be ready on Sunday, and we can't afford any surprises. It wasn't a full confession, but it was enough to stir the fire inside her. She texted Sandra, "Tell your brother I'm getting the rest tonight." This time, it wasn't about survival. It was about justice. When Delilah arrived at the mansion that morning, Jacob greeted her at the front door. That slick smile was back on his face, the kind that made her skin crawl now. "Delilah," he said warmly, too warmly. "Caroline and I have a gala event tonight. You'll stay late with Ethan. Just keep him out of the way." She nodded. "Of course, sir." She watched him walk away, already thinking 3 moves ahead. The Richards would be gone tonight. The house would be empty, except for her and Ethan. It was her one chance to make Jacob say what she needed, the truth, in his own words. No more guessing, no more secrets. And this time she'd record every second. Evening came slowly, painfully. Delilah helped Ethan with his homework, trying to keep things light even though her hands were trembling. She could feel something coming, like a storm building outside that no one else could see. As she tucked him into bed, Ethan pulled her closer and signed, "Don't go downstairs alone." Delilah leaned in, brushing his hair back. "I won't," she signed gently. "But I need to help, so no more kids get hurt, I promise." Ethan's little hand caught hers. His eyes were wide, afraid, but he nodded. Delilah stepped into the hallway and pulled out her phone. She opened the voice recorder app, hit record, and slipped it into her apron. Then she walked to the study. Jacob's study door was closed. She pushed it open and stepped inside, heart pounding. Jacob was seated behind the desk, already back from the gala, glass of whiskey in hand. "Delilah," he said, not looking up, "I told you to stay with Ethan." She closed the door behind her. "I know, but we need to talk." He slowly looked up at her, eyebrows raised. "Oh?" "I know what's in the basement," she said softly, clearly. He paused, then took a sip of his drink. "Do you?" She stepped forward. The room, the pictures, the fake passports, the names, the locked cell. His face didn't change, but the air did. Still, tense. Then he chuckled. "You're playing a dangerous game, you know." "No," she said. "You are. I have evidence. I've backed it up. If anything happens to me or Ethan, it goes public." Jacob stood slowly, and something in his face shifted. Gone was the smile. Gone was the charm. In its place was something cold. "You think anyone will believe a housemaid?" he said. "Single mother, bills piling up, accused of stealing once at her last job. Yes?" I checked. Delilah didn't move. "You trafficked children, Jacob," she said. And for a moment, just a flicker, his mask cracked. He walked around the desk toward her. "I built this operation for years," he hissed. "Clean, efficient, hidden, beneath the safest disguise, charity. And you? You think you'll ruin it because one mute boy cried on your shoulder?" Delilah's hand trembled inside her apron. "Ethan's not just a boy," she said. "He's your son." Jacob laughed bitterly. "He's a liability. Always has been." That was it. That was enough. Delilah reached for her phone, but Jacob was faster. He lunged, grabbing her wrist. The phone fell to the ground. He shoved her against the wall, eyes wild. "You want to destroy my life? For what? A kid who barely speaks?" Delilah pushed him back with everything she had. "I speak for him." They struggled, his hand grabbing at her apron pocket, trying to rip it away, until a sharp crash interrupted them. Ethan. He stood in the hallway, pale, his small body trembling. A broken vase lay at his feet. "Go back to your room," Jacob shouted. But Ethan didn't move. His hands rose. He signed something fast, over and over. Delilah understood. "Run. Run. Run." She darted forward, scooped up the phone, and grabbed Ethan's hand. They ran, down the hallway, through the foyer. Jacob's heavy footsteps pounding behind them. Delilah fumbled with the lock, yanked the door open, and shoved Ethan into the night air. Jacob was right behind her, grabbing her arm just as she opened the car door. "You think this ends with a video?" he growled. "You're already finished." Delilah broke free, shoved him back with her elbow, and slammed the door shut. The car roared to life. Ethan clung to her side, tears running down his cheeks. She sped off into the night, not looking back. Her phone buzzed. Sandra. She hit the speaker with one shaky hand. I have everything, Delilah cried. He confessed. It's all recorded. I'm on my way. Sandra's voice was tight. We've got him. Detectives are on their way to the house. Go straight to the 5th Street station. Ethan's safe with you now. Just get there. Delilah nodded, eyes locked on the road. She looked down at Ethan. His tiny hand reached up and signed, "Thank you." And she whispered back, signing through tears, "You're safe now, I promise." The House of Secrets had finally cracked open. Now it was time to bring the truth into the light. Rain fell steadily outside the police station as Delilah pulled up to the curb, heart racing, hands tight on the wheel. She had driven straight through the night, every second expecting Jacob to come after them. But she made it. Inside the car, Ethan sat curled in the passenger seat, watching the station through the rain-slicked window. His small fingers gripped the stuffed bear Delilah had tucked into her purse weeks ago, just in case. "This is it," she whispered, brushing the hair gently from his face. "We're safe." A uniformed officer waved them inside. Everything moved fast from there. Detectives, child services, legal forms, intake reports. Ethan stayed close to her, silent but brave, while Delilah handed over her phone with the recordings, the photos, and the backup links she had sent to the cloud. The moment the lead detective, Martinez, heard Jacob's voice on the recording, he straightened in his seat. "That's all we need," he said. "We've been watching the Richards for weeks. You just gave us the final piece." Within an hour, squad cars were rolling toward the mansion. Delilah and Ethan were escorted to a private room where they waited, hot drinks in hand, watching through a security monitor. Flashing lights painted the mansion in red and blue as officers swarmed the property. The front door was breached, the basement exposed. The hidden rooms were real, and now, no longer hidden. Jacob and Caroline were led out in cuffs. Jacob shouted something, but no one listened. The perfect image he had worked so hard to build was gone. Delilah exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. It was over. In the days that followed, the story exploded. News outlets picked it up. Wealthy couple behind child trafficking ring arrested. Photos of the mansion behind yellow tape flooded the internet. But none of it showed the whole truth. Not like Ethan's drawings did. Not like Delilah had seen with her own eyes. More children were found. More names came to light. Jacob's associates were tracked down and arrested. Offshore accounts were frozen. Victims, once silent, were being given voices again. And Delilah, she became something else entirely. No longer just a housekeeper. She was now the woman who saved a child, who helped bring down a network hiding behind charity galas and expensive suits. But her focus wasn't on the headlines. It was on Ethan. For the first few weeks, he stayed with a kind foster couple who worked closely with trauma specialists. Delilah visited every day. She brought him books, his favorite snacks. They practiced sign language together, slow and patient. And sometimes, they just sat in silence, letting safety wrap around them like a warm blanket. One afternoon, as she was packing up to leave, Ethan tugged her sleeve. His hands moved carefully. "Can I come home with you?" Delilah's eyes filled with tears. "I want that more than anything," she whispered. The adoption process wasn't simple. Single, working, not rich. But Delilah had something more powerful than all of that. Proof of love. The court read through pages of letters, from social workers, from Ethan's doctor, from the detective who said, without her, this child would still be trapped. And from Ethan himself. He didn't speak during the court hearing. He didn't need to. He walked to the judge's bench, pulled out a folded paper, and handed it over. It was a drawing. A woman holding the hand of a boy under a big, shining sun. One word was written at the top in crooked letters. Mom. The judge smiled through tears. "Ethan," she said, "Do you want Miss Delilah to be your mother?" He nodded. Then, clear and soft, he spoke for the first time in front of others. "Yes, she already is." A few months later, in a cozy little house on the quieter side of town, Delilah made breakfast while Ethan and Mia sat at the kitchen table working on a school project. The sun poured through the window. Music played softly in the background. They laughed. They bickered over crayons. They fought over the last pancake. It was normal. Something Delilah once thought she'd never find again. That afternoon, they went to a local park where Ethan spoke on behalf of a new foundation Delilah had started, the Silent Voices Foundation, created in honor of children like Ethan, who had things to say but no one to hear them. He stood at the podium, tiny hands gripping the sides, and spoke clearly to the small crowd. "I was scared. I couldn't talk. But someone listened. Now I help others find their voice too." The audience clapped. Delilah clapped the loudest. That night, after the dishes were washed and homework was done, Ethan curled beside her on the couch. "Mom?" "Yes, baby." He looked up at her, eyes serious. "Thank you for not giving up on me." She smiled, pulling him close. "You saved me too, you know." Outside, the stars blinked softly through the trees. No more locked doors. No more secrets. Just a family held together by love and a promise. Never again would Ethan be unheard. Because now, his voice, silent or spoken, would always matter. And Delilah would always be there to listen,